is about to bring you into a good land. Make sure you don't forget God, your God.
Hello and welcome back to Teaching Through the Bible. Today we're continuing through Deuteronomy. We have already looked at the first few sections in this outline here. The preamble. Again, that is saying who is initiating this covenant treaty. That's Yahweh. He's speaking through Moses, but it's Yahweh who is initiating this. And the historical prologue, chapters 1 through 4, what he has done. So he begins who he is, and then what he's done. And so now we're moving to chapter 5 in Deuteronomy, what is often called the Ten Commandments. There's an exercise that'll be really helpful if you choose to do. If you are doing this for a class or part of your schoolwork, then this is definitely especially important. But even if not, this is a great exercise to try out, and I think it'll be really helpful. You just pause the video and read through this chapter, Deuteronomy chapter 5, as well as Exodus chapter 20, because what we call the Ten Commandments is in both of those chapters. So look at both those chapters, Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 25. When you look at them, look at the repeated material, and then divide that up how you think it looks like those 10 units should be divided up. Now this may seem like a no-brainer. This may seem like, oh yeah, I know the Ten Commandments. Boom, 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 boom. Not a problem. But what you may not know is actually there's some disagreement on how this should be divided up. Jewish people divide it up one way. Protestant people divide it up another way. So Presbyterian, Baptist, Methodist, that group. Roman Catholics divide it up another way. There's actually a number of different ways, not even just those three. There's a number of different ways that people break this up. And so try to, as best you can, clear your mind of what you already know, what you already assume, and instead of assuming what these 10 divisions are, look at it as much as you can with fresh eyes. Just look at the repeated material in both those chapters and say, how would I divide this up? What looks to be the divisions here? Now, there's some people when they divide it up, they're going into the Hebrew of it all, and I realize most people can't do that, but just in what you've got in front of you, do your best with that. And then come back to this video and we'll talk about it. So now, hoping you've been able to look at those chapters, but even if you haven't, we're going to go over this now, these chapter 5 here, chapter 20 of Exodus. I said back in Exodus, when we were going over that part of the Bible, that we would talk about that more here. And that's why, because it is the same material. And here, when I talk about the Ten Commandments, I often do this. I often do these quotes, as I've done throughout the videos so far. And there's a reason for that. The reason is because the Bible never actually calls them the Ten Commandments. What the Bible actually says is it calls them the 10 words. That's the actual, literal translation, the 10 words or the 10 things. And so we look at this, and a lot of people say, oh, look at all these commandments. So the 10 words become the 10 commandments. And so that's pretty understandable how it got to that point. But then that gives us a bias as we look at how to divide it up. Because, so it's not actually called the Ten Commandments. But if we call it the Ten Commandments, we are immediately looking for 10 commands, aren't we? But let's look at the beginning of chapter 5 here. If you were paying close attention to the repeated material, Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5, you may have noticed something. Let's have Deuteronomy 5 open. Let's have Exodus 20 open. And let's see how it starts. Deuteronomy 5 says, "And Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the rules that I speak in your hearing today, and you shall learn them and be careful to do them. Yahweh our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. Not with our fathers did Yahweh make this covenant, but with us, who are all of us here alive today. Yahweh spoke with you face to face at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, while I stood between Yahweh and you at the time to declare to you the word of Yahweh. For you were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up into the mountain. He said, I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And so on and so forth, the part that we're all familiar with. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And again, continuing on throughout the rest of the commands that we see. Now, chapter 5 begins with a part that's not in Exodus chapter 20. Deuteronomy chapter 5 has more at the beginning of the chapter, so we're not saying all of chapter 5 is part of these 10 words. But what is the repeated part? Well, the repeated part starts with, it begins with, he said, and goes. Exodus chapter 20 begins with, God spoke all these words, saying, and then it goes. So the first thing that we actually see here that's part of this block of words is not, you shall have no other gods before me. The first part is, I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It's in Exodus 20, verse 2. It's in Deuteronomy 5, verse 6. That's the beginning. Now, a number of people will make the argument that this is kind of the prelude, kind of the before part that sets up for the 10 words, the 10 commandments. But again, I think this is a bias of calling it the 10 commandments. So obviously that's not a command, therefore it can't be part of the 10 commandments. But when God talks about this, these being the 10 words, then he doesn't say there's the beginning part and then there's the 10 words. That block is called the 10 words, so that seems like that should be part of the 10 words. And if you understand that it doesn't have to be a commandment, then it does make sense that right there is actually the first word, the first thing he says. So I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. But then we have a question. If that's number one, well, how are we splitting the other? We got 9 slots left, but we usually think of them as 10. Some people will want to split out other ones or combine other ones. I think what we see here is if you understand that that's the first one, that it's not, you shall have no other gods before me, it's, I am Yahweh your God. Then, if we continue to read on, you shall have no other gods before me, you shall not make for yourself a carved image. Well, that just follows logically, right? You don't have any other gods before me, you don't make images of them. You don't make images of me to look like them. You don't make images because you don't have any other gods. You just have me. So what a lot of people, especially I think of the Protestant view, will look at, I guess they'll call it 1 and 2. They'll say, no other gods, don't make images. Well, it's kind of 2 parts of the same thing, isn't it? It's like 2 sides of the same coin. They kind of fit together as one thought. One of them is, don't have other gods, but then the, quote, second commandment is really just fleshing out what that looks like. You're not going to have other gods, then you're not going to make these idols, right? And then we move on to each of the other commands. Don't take Yahweh's name in vain, observe the Sabbath, all that stuff. So I think what a lot of people would say are number 1 and number 2 are actually just the second word, because the first word was, I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And again, if we're taking away the bias of thinking of them as having to be called the 10 commandments, what have we seen throughout the Bible? And what have we seen even just throughout Deuteronomy? What have we seen throughout each of these books? God has a pattern of, here's what I have done, now here's what I expect from you. He always starts with himself, right? Exodus, the whole book of Exodus. What's the whole first part of it? Almost half the book is him saving his people. All the way up to chapter 20 is him saving his people. And then, only then, chapter 20, does he give them commands and say, here's all these commands. Here's this list of commands. Right? Now he's given them some instructions before, the Passover, things like that. But as far as this, all these stipulations that he's going to lay on the congregation, it's really starting in chapter 20 after he's already saved this people. So there's what he's done and now what they are to do. And we've seen, just looking at this covenant outline, God says who he is in the preamble. The historical prologue is what he's already done for them. And then he gives them the commands. So the historical prologue kind of fits as an expansion of this first word. I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. What was the historical prologue? It was talking about leading up to this point where he's saved them, he's protected them, he's taken care of them, even not just out of Egypt, but for the 40 years after that. So that's that whole first 4 chapters, and then we get to all these commands that we're going to see the rest of the book. It's not just, hey, here's what you got to do, this is all on you. It's, here's what I have done. Now that I've done this, here's what I expect of my people. And so the first word is, so the 10 commandments is the same pattern. The first word is, here's what I have done. First of all, I did this already. This is what I've already done. Just like Jesus it's what he's done. And then he tells us what to do, but it's what he's done first and foremost. And so that's what we see in the 10 commandments. And so I like to call them the 10 words. I didn't want to give away too much by calling them that all the time leading up to this, but that is how I would typically refer to them now. That's why I always said 10 commandments, because they're not all 10 actually commandments. And then after what Yahweh has done, now we see what we're supposed to do. And so, in fact, the rest of Deuteronomy, we will see all of this fleshed out more. So I just said the historical prologue in the first 4 chapters is kind of an expansion upon this first word. Well, the rest of Deuteronomy, or a large portion of it, chapters 5 through 26, is going to be an expansion on the next 9 words. And this is something that you can see in a number of outlines. If you go look them up, a lot of people will recognize that the next chapters here, they're all coming from these commands. So you have a command not to murder. You have a section in these next chapters that talks about things that come from that command. Not just murder specifically, but harming other people, valuing life, that sort of thing. And you'll see that really what God's getting at is here's the big points, the big bullet points, and then he's going to expand on that throughout the rest of Deuteronomy. And Jesus does this, again, same kind of thing. People don't always recognize it's kind of a copy-paste sort of thing almost, but Jesus is doing that at the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, don't, you've heard it said, don't murder, but I say if you hate your brother, then you've murdered in your heart. He's showing the expansion of that. Not that he started that expansion, but he's saying, here's what it really meant, even back then. And that's what we are actually seeing in Deuteronomy. We see these commands, and then we see the expansion of those in chapters 5 through 26. So you can think of the quote 10 commandments. It's bullet points. It's saying, that honor the Sabbath, honor your parents. Well, what are some more details of that? We're going to see that here. So the next videos are going to be talking about these. We're going to kind of go one by one instead of just going through chapter 5 all at once. We'll go through each of these words and the applicable verses and chapters that follow that really kind of tie in with that. And now there's some disagreement on exactly where each section begins and ends, and if you look up different people's divisions of it, you'll see that kind of disagreement there. But what people don't tend to disagree on is that it does have that general pattern. So I'm not going to get really like distracted by, all right, where exactly does this section end and this other section begin? I'm just going to focus on, all right, well, here's the second word, and here's, things that we see that apply with that in the later chapters, chapters maybe 6 through 12. And here's the third word, and then we're going to look at those chapters that broadly connect with that one, and so on and so forth. So that's what the next videos will look like as we go through each of these words. So we've already talked, essentially, with the historical prologue about the first word. I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. I have done this. This is what I have done for you already. I've already saved you. Now here is my expectation. And we'll learn more about that expectation beginning next time in our video on the second word, beginning with, you shall have no other gods before me. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.